You're listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. The goal? To know Jesus a little better so we can live like him a little more. And now, here's today's host, Wes Feldner.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Loop. My name is Wes, and today I'm in studio with our lead pastor, Brandon Connor. What's up, Brandon?
Not much, man. How about you?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day. It's some awesome weather. You know, you only get like a handful of just perfect days here on the coast, and we're
in a stretch.
Yes, we've had a run.
I love it.
It's been awesome. So if you haven't been outside lately, y'all need to get outside.
Go for a walk.
And then by the time this episode airs, it's going to be back to Mississippi heat.
Trashy weather. Everybody's going to be like, what are these guys
What
smoking?
are you talking about? Awesome. Well, hey, today we have something really important that's on your heart for couples. You know, we had recently an event for marriages called Married Life Live. And I know that coming out of that event, you had some things that you kind of wanted to unpack in a podcast form. And so tell us a little bit about what's on your heart today and what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, when we did Married Life Live back in February, sold out an event in Harrison County and here in Ocean Springs. And, you know, people come out to have a good time and enjoy a date night with their spouse. But the content for that evening was a night where we spent time talking about crucial conversations.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, I only got to touch on a small fraction of the concepts that are in this book that really do help couples improve their communication in their marriage. And so, you know, the further I got into the book, you know, working on it for other stuff, I was like, man, there's so much in here that would really help couples. And I felt like we only scratched the surface at Married Life Live. So I thought, you know what, let's go back with a podcast and let's spend some time in a podcast unpacking some of these other concepts that might help couples.
That's great.
out.
Yeah, because you've actually taken this content. It wasn't just for Married Life Live. I mean, that event was a couple of months ago, but you've also been using this same book to kind of unpack with business leaders in our area through Leader's Edge. And so they've been getting the extra content. But I guess for the folks that maybe weren't at the event, or like I said, the event was 2 months ago. I mean, if you put me on the spot and said, hey, why don't you tell me about crucial conversations, I might not be able to regurgitate all the stuff that we unpacked at the event, but just catch us up a little bit. Talk to us about the concept and, you know, where we were at with you at the event and what we talked about, and then talk to us about the book.
Yeah. So at the event, we introduced the concept of crucial conversations. And we just told people, we said a crucial conversation is a conversation that has three components. Opinions are different.
Yep.
Emotions are strong. Mm-hmm. And the stakes are high. So I'm going to say it one more time. Opinions are different.
Always.
Emotions are strong.
Most of the time.
And the stakes are high. And so you see that in business, right? You see, so I'm talking about this, or did talk about this at Leader's Edge for the last 3 months, because there are going to be a lot of conversations that people in a business have to have with each other because there's going to be a difference of opinions.
Right.
Emotions are strong and the stakes are really, really high. Yep. But what we also know is that that's not just true in our professional life. This is also true in our personal lives.
Absolutely.
Especially in our marriages. There are all kinds of conversations where opinions are different between a husband and a wife. Emotions are strong, and the stakes are really, really high. I mean, not in our marriages because we're pastors.
No, we're perfect, right?
We're perfect, but in other people's marriages.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the crucial conversations maybe that you have to have as a couple, or maybe even that you have had, you know, with your wife. Crucial conversations. Time to get real.
Yeah. So, you know, I think a lot of people know we're celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary this year. And so we already did our anniversary trip together. So in 25 years, we've had a lot of crucial conversations.
Oh, yeah.
I think most people who come to Mosaic know that historically I struggled with anger. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of those crucial conversations that we would have over and over and over again. It really was, you know, a process and a journey for me to overcome that and get to a place in my life where some of the fruit of the Spirit was really being produced, things like kindness and gentleness and self-control. And so thankfully, you know, because my wife was persistent, that we have this crucial conversation until it got resolved. It finally got resolved. We've had crucial conversations about parenting.
Yeah.
Steph and I did not always see eye to eye. And I think most couples are that way. You know, there's probably one that wants to preserve the relationship and one that wants to fix the kid and prepare them for life. And so we had difference of opinion about, what we should do in terms of how we should raise our kids. Obviously, we've had discussions about money. I think the number one thing that couples fight about is money. And so in a lot of relationships, there's a spender and there's a saver.
Yeah.
And so you have a difference of opinion there in terms of what you should do. Emotions get strong and the stakes can be high, depending on how much money we're talking about and how much money we're spending or not making.
Yeah, that's the conversation that I was thinking. Like, you're spending money that you don't have.
100%. I mean, you see couples get into credit card debt and creditors start calling and the stress builds. And that can be a very heavy conversation. Talk to a lot of couples about the issue of sexual intimacy. Obviously, I think in a lot of marriages, there's a difference of opinion there in terms of frequency and what that should look like, and emotions can be strong.
Absolutely.
And when you're talking about something like marriage, the stakes are high. Yeah. And so, I think a lot of couples have to navigate that conversation. If they're not happy with their sex life, it's like, are we going to talk about it or not?
Right.
And what's at stake if we don't talk about it?
Yeah.
And this becomes an issue when we start to grow apart and their resentment builds. And then you've got all kinds of temptations out there like pornography and affairs and all types of things where those needs could be met in a really, really unhealthy way. And so what we're trying to do is we're just trying to say to couples, you got to get better at having crucial conversations. There's a lot of different topics that may come up over the course of your marriage.
Yeah.
And if you talk about them, then you can come back together because it gets resolved. But if you don't talk about them in a healthy way, then you're probably going to grow apart and the marriage is not going to be what God intended for it to be.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to ask a question. I feel like you kind of danced around the answer a little bit or maybe answered it in a roundabout way. But why is it so important to have a crucial conversation? Like, why can't we just leave things unsaid?
I told people at the very first Married Life Live event that the health of your marriage can be measured between the moment that an issue surfaces and the moment that it gets resolved. And so if you are frustrated with your spouse and there is a problem, whether it's a money problem, a sexual intimacy problem, and it takes you days or weeks to get that issue resolved, you probably have a pretty healthy marriage. But if it takes you months or years, or you never address it at all, then you probably have a very unhealthy marriage. And you're going to grow apart, and problems are going to become wedges that drive you in different directions. And so I really do believe that the health of a marriage can be measured between that moment that an issue surfaces and the moment that the issue really does get resolved. In fact, I think biblically there is a principle in Scripture that talks about how we should not let the sun go down on our wrath. And it's talking about it in the context of a marriage relationship.
Yeah.
And so when you think about that concept, it's like, oh, even God's word says, like, you don't want long periods of time to pass without resolving these issues. It's not healthy and it's not good. And so we need to hear the wisdom of God's word, and we need to say, okay, that the health of my marriage is being measured between the moment that it surfaces and the moment it gets resolved. And I got to take that seriously. And we have to be able to talk about really heavy issues in a really healthy way in a really short period of time.
Yeah.
That's not easy.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a mantra that you have written on your whiteboard in your office. And so I really do think it's a balance because people can take it to the extreme. So that the mantra on your wall says, the bigger the gap, the better the response.
Yes.
And so I can see somebody like me, or maybe other couples out there that are maybe watching this episode and they're like, I just want to say it right, and they're just, that gap is just getting so big.
Yeah.
And they're refusing to have a conversation. And so there's definitely a balance. You don't want to let so much time pass before you actually have the conversation.
Yeah, the reason I have that on my wall is because my mind is ready to say it.
Yeah.
And my heart is not ready to say it. And so I have these emotional reactions, and I'm very passionate.
Yeah.
And I know that if I give myself some time, at least for me, what I'm going to say probably is not going to change, but how I say it is what's going to change in that gap. And so I'm trying to give myself a little bit of time to calm down, because I'm typically the guy who's ready to have the conversation right now.
Right.
And so I say it too quickly. I say it poorly.
Yeah.
I say it with the wrong tone or an attitude, and it does more harm than good. And so I have learned, like, hey, you're going to be fine. I'm not going to let the sun go down on my wrath. Like, I'm going to say it before the end of the day. But if I take a break and I just calm down a little bit and I think about how I want to say it, not just what I want to say, it helps me have a crucial conversation in a much healthier way.
Yeah. But you are going to have the conversation.
Oh, yeah. But there are other people who don't want to have the conversation.
No, we'd avoid it like the plague.
They just run from it.
So at Married Life Live, you talked a lot about what to do before you have a crucial conversation. So I guess the question for today is, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah. So quick recap for people who missed Married Life Live or have forgotten everything that we talked about there. You know, before you have a crucial conversation, I said, number one, your heart has to be right. You know, if your heart is full of revenge, anger, frustration, you're not going to have a crucial conversation and have it well. And so we really do have to make sure that our heart is right before we jump into the conversation. I talked to other couples and their heart's not right, and it's reflected in a slightly different way. A lot of couples, they're going into that conversation to win the argument, not to resolve the conflict. And those are two totally different goals. And so it's like, dude, I'm going to prove you wrong and I'm going to be right. And it's like, well, that's not going to produce a very productive conversation.
Yeah.
It's probably going to drive you apart. You're going to have a winner and you're going to have a loser. And that's going to make you into enemies of one another. And so you want to make sure your heart is right. Second, I told people, you want to make sure that your perspective is right.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of people about conflict in their marriage, and one of the things that I see over and over again is that people who have been deeply hurt by their spouse, they see their spouse as being 100% responsible for the problem. And I try to tell people, like, if you don't have a right perspective going into a crucial conversation and you can't see that you own at least a little bit of that problem, you're probably not going to have a healthy conversation, because you're placing 100% of the blame on your spouse. I don't care what your spouse has done. They may own 95% of the problem, but you still own about 5% of the problem. And so you've got to be able to see your part in the problem, have a right perspective. And then finally, I tell couples, you got to have the right issue pegged.
Yeah.
Because what happens when you get into that conversation is you say something like, you know, I just don't like the way that you talk to me.
Yeah.
And you did, and you start to lay out the examples, and they go, really? You don't like the way I talk to you? Well, the reason I talk to you is because of the way you treat me.
Yeah.
And then they change the subject, and so the real issue never gets resolved. And that person continues to talk to you in a way that is degrading. They continue to talk to you in a way that may be verbally abusive, and it never changes because they feel justified because they changed the subject and pointed the finger back at you. And so you got to peg the right issue and live on that issue. And if you do all of that before you start the conversation, you're going to have a much healthier conversation. Now, today, I want to change gears.
Right.
Because today is not so much about what do you do before the conversation. Today is all about what do you do when you're in the middle of the conversation. Like, how do you open your mouth and have a really tough conversation where opinions are different, emotions are strong, and the stakes are high, and have it really, really well?
Yeah. Well, go for it. Like, because I'm all ears, man. I need help in this area.
I want to start by just saying, in the middle of the conversation, you've got to be prepared for the fact that the other party is likely to get defensive, right? So if someone says, hey, man, we need to sit down and we need to have a really serious talk.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like,
the dukes are up, man. Like, what?
Yes, walls are going up. You're getting defensive. You're nervous. I don't care if it's business.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's at home with your spouse or with a friend. When someone says something like that, immediately your mind starts racing and you start wondering, where is this going? What is getting ready to happen? And you get nervous because human beings were wired to look for threats.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the way you survive. And so if you see threats, all of a sudden you start to get really defensive. And we need to know that when we go into that conversation and we're getting ready to confront someone about a heavy issue, We need to know and be prepared for the fact that they are going to get defensive, right?
So, I mean, what does that look like very practically? So I'm asking you dirty because, like I have a tendency to be defensive in moments like this. Danielle would confirm, probably the folks that I work with.
She's hitting the like button right now. No, I'm teasing.
So, but like, what does that look like? Like, give us some examples of what that looks like practically.
Yeah, it looks two different ways, and it's really important for us to understand this because the two ways in which people look defensive, they are the exact opposite of one another. And so you can't just think defensiveness always looks the same way. We've all heard about the fight or the flight response.
Yeah.
And so when someone gets defensive, they're either ready to fight or they're ready to flee and run in the opposite direction. So I say it like this. I say people are either going to completely shut down or they are going to blow up. And both of those are just indicators that, hey, right now, the person that I'm trying to have a crucial conversation with, they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
They feel the need to get defensive. And so in that moment, what we have to do is we have to take a time out.
Yeah.
And we have to say, you know what? I still want to talk about this issue. But right now, we can't talk about the real issue because we need to talk about another issue. We need to talk about the fact that you're getting really defensive. And then you got to explain to them the behavior that you're seeing. You're going, man, I just feel like you're shutting down. I feel like you just want to get out of this conversation. I feel like you just want it to be over. You don't really want to talk about this. Or you have to explain, hey, I see you getting really aggressive. I see you getting really angry. I hear a change in your tone. I hear a change in your volume. And it just suggests to me that you can't address this issue because you don't feel safe. And then what we have to do is we have to restore our partner to safety.
Yeah.
And the way we do that is so important. The way you restore your partner to safety is you clarify your intent, but you do not water down your content.
Okay.
So what happens with a lot of married couples is husband may try to, talk to his wife, or the wife may start trying to talk to the husband, and the other party starts to get angry, or the other party starts to cry. And all of the sudden, the person who's starting the crucial conversation just says, man, this isn't worth it. And they try to bail out of the conversation. They try to water it down and act like, well, it's not really that bad. And, let's just forget the whole thing. And we start to water down the conversation or the content of the conversation. And when we do that, the issue never gets resolved. And so we have to understand that we can make our partner feel safe by clarifying our intent, but never watering down the content. And so we say, listen, the whole reason I want to talk to you about this is because I love you. I care about you. I care about our marriage. I care about our family. And I want our family to be healthy, but I know that it can't be healthy if this problem continues. And so I just want to talk about it in a really healthy way. I want you to feel safe. I want you to know my intention is to love you. I'm not thinking about leaving you. Like, I just want to resolve this so that we're both happy in the marriage. And when you restore them to safety, now you can get out of the timeout. You can go back in and you can start to address the real issue. But you can't water down the content. Clarify your intent. Once the intentions have been clarified, once they feel safe, once they feel reassured of your love, then you can go back in and address the real issue without watering it down.
That's great. Clarify intent without watering down your content. That's good.
Yeah.
That's a great way to make somebody feel safe again.
100%.
And to help maybe break down those walls of defensiveness. And so, very, very good. So I guess the question is, what happens next? What happens after you clarify your intent?
Yeah. I tell people to start with the facts. Okay. So, a lot of times
I'm taking notes over here. I need like a playbook. I need a playbook for crucial conversations.
I got pages of notes over here. Okay. I review this stuff regularly. You got to start with facts because I think typically when we have a difference of opinion, what we want to do is we kind of want to stack the deck in our favor.
Right.
And sometimes we exaggerate. Sometimes we try to make it sound way worse than it is. And so, Steph and I, we spent a year together in counseling. I guess it was about 15 or 20 years ago now. And one of the things that the counselor confronted me on is he said, Brandon, you're really a persuasive communicator, and you do that by exaggerating the truth. And he says, you say things like, oh, you never, you always. And he goes, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
And he says, so what you got to do is you've got to, it's okay to confront an issue, but you have to be factual about it. And you can't exaggerate it. You can't just live on feelings.
Yeah.
Like you've got to be clear about, hey, these are the facts. Like if we're disagreeing about money, here are the facts. We've got this much money coming in and we got this much money going out. And that's going to be a problem long term.
Yeah.
You know, and so you focus on facts. You don't exaggerate. You don't spend a lot of time getting into your feelings, and you try to help them understand the facts and how those facts are creating real problems in the marriage.
Yeah. Stay on the facts.
Second thing, don't jump to conclusions. And so what we do is we make assumptions about things based on what we think the facts are telling us. So we say, well, here's the facts. The facts are you don't ever come home from work until 7 o'clock at night. And because of that, I feel like you don't care about me and the kids. Well, that's not necessarily true.
Right.
But what we're doing is we are jumping to a conclusion based on what we think the facts are telling us. And so what I tell people all the time is like, don't jump to conclusions. Rather than making an accusation, what we do is we have to ask questions.
Right.
And so the facts are, you're not coming home till 7 o'clock every night. And so I've got a question for you. How do you think that makes me and the kids feel? Or, hey, the facts are you're not coming home till at least 7 o'clock every night. I've got a question for you. What are your priorities? And you ask a question rather than making an accusation that, again, puts them back on the defensive, makes them feel like this isn't a safe conversation. And by asking questions, you can better understand where they're coming from and how they feel about the situation. And you may learn something about your spouse that you never knew.
Yeah.
And so you may discover in this conversation, well, I'm not coming home till 7 o'clock because I think I'm about to lose my job.
Yeah.
And I'm really scared. The last thing I want to do is leave you and the kids feeling neglected. And this is probably not a healthy way to deal with that fear at work, but that's what's really going on. You know, I got called into the office. I, felt like I missed all these deadlines. I botched this project. I lost this client. And because of that, I'm just so afraid I'm going to lose my job that I'm trying to go above and beyond. And now you're going, oh, you do love us. You want to be a provider for us. You're not neglecting us. We're not low on the priority. There's something else going on here. And now I can help you navigate the problem rather than just turning on you because I don't really understand what's going on. And so I think when we do that kind of stuff, it starts to help us make real progress in the middle of these types of conversations.
That's great. That's great. Stick to facts. Ask lots of questions. Anything else?
Yeah. And I think the big thing is just don't make those accusations.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, I think about times when my kids, were coming home late and they walked in and I just started making all kinds of accusations. And then they had a very good explanation for why they were late. And I was like, wow, I feel like an idiot, right? And so we've got to do a better job of really asking questions and not just jumping to conclusions and making accusations. Because a lot of times we don't really know the whole story. Yeah. We think we know the whole story. We think we know someone's motives. We think we have all the facts, but we rarely see the full picture. And so by just giving people an opportunity to share the rest of the story, Paul Harvey, like by giving them an opportunity to share the rest of the story, we can get to the real issue. And the truth is, maybe my speculation was right, or maybe it was wrong. But it's going to be a whole lot safer for us to talk about it by asking questions rather than accusing them of something and jumping to a conclusion.
That's great. Man, crucial conversations.
Hey, I would just say, read the book.
Read the book.
I hope this podcast is just a teaser. It's a great resource for, again, marriages, for business leaders. Over 5 million copies have been sold for a reason. This podcast is not being sponsored by Crucial Conversations, but I just think it's a great, great resource that helps us grow in our ability to communicate in ways that are far more effective, especially on the really heavy issues that often don't get addressed or they don't get addressed in a very healthy way.
Yeah. So one little PS, because I feel like you've given us some great tools today to have some crucial conversations in our marriage. What about folks that are facing issues? They're having these crucial conversations or have had these crucial conversations, but they just need some help navigating how to solve the issue. Are there any resources or tools available for those folks?
228-875-3500.
That's the office number.
That's the church office number. And so call it, man. We've got a guy on our staff team. His name is Ozzy.
Yeah.
He oversees all of our counseling efforts. He has a lay counseling team of people who they've been there.
Yeah.
They know what you're going through. They've come through it on the other side. They've learned a lot of these lessons, and they can share them with others. Sometimes it's hard, man, because your opinions are so different on an issue. Sometimes you just need a third-party perspective to kind of help you understand what Scripture has to say about that issue and brings you back together around God's Word. And so just know that, there's a book that's out there, but if you need a human being, which a lot of us do, told you guys we spend a lot of time in counseling together. Right. If you need a human being just to kind of process and give you perspective and help you think about all of this stuff, man, reach out. Ozzy and his team would be a great resource to help you learn how to communicate more effectively with your spouse.
That's great. Well, the next time that Danielle and I are going to have a crucial conversation, I'm bust out my little notebook here.
Well,
I've got some tools and resources. Hopefully you guys were taking some notes as well as we were unpacking this stuff, but really good stuff. Crucial conversations for marriage. Thanks so much, Brandon, for taking the time to unpack this stuff and making it applicable to marriages. So really appreciate it.
We just care about your marriage, and if you know somebody struggling with this type of issue in their marriage, encourage them to listen to the podcast or read the book.
Send them the link, man.
Call the church, man. We just want to help couples in their marriage in any way that we can.
That's great. Thanks so much for tuning in. We hope to see you guys this weekend for one of our regular services. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. For more information, visit us online at mosaicgc.com.